Welcome to Early Exchange with Femi Ayodele, Sam Oruoje, and Idahosa Osamanze.
Sustain that industry. So if government does not have much money, they should find an enabling environment.
Now, what are these issues? The petrol is still imported because local refineries are not working.
Does it stop at giving a directive? What should be done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Good morning and welcome to Early Exchange, where we focus on issues related to business, finance, national issues, and the economy. I am Femi Ayodele. Today we have a special package for you. We'll be looking at the pension reforms in Nigeria. As you know that our obligation on this program is to shape policy and advance development. What do you need to do when it comes to the time for your retirement? These are things we're going to talk about for the next 3 hours, and we hope that we'll be able to inform, educate you. And as you join us for the best of programming today, we'll make your day worthwhile. Now let's kick off the show with news update, and Blessing is standing by to take us around the world. Blessing, good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Femi. I am well. Good morning. Thank you for joining me on the Morning News Update and Sook News. I am Blessing Aichi. On today's bulletin, we're bringing you up to speed on current happenings around the globe. Now let's begin right away. President Bola Tinubu has announced the appointment of new and returning chief executives to lead various agencies under the Federal Ministry of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy. According to the special advisors to the president on media and publicity, Ajuri Gilali, Aminu Maida has been chosen as the CEO of the Nigerian Communications Commission, NCC, while Nkechi Egeton Ideen will serve as the MD and CEO of the Nigerian Communications Satellite Limited, NIGCOMSAT. Similarly, Kashifu Inuwa Adelahi will maintain his position as DG CEO for the National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA. And Dr. Vincent Olatunji is to head the Nigeria Data Protection Commission, NDPC, as the National Commissioner, CEO. The appointment also features Tola Odeyemi as the Postmaster General and CEO of the Nigerian Postal Services, and Idris Aluba Kundi becomes the Special Advisor to the President on Technology and Digital Economy. These appointments take immediate effect. The federal government has unveiled the operational guidelines for the new NHIA Act 2022, which empowers the National Health Insurance Authority, NHIA, to govern, regulate, and enforce matters relating to health insurance in the country. The guidelines, launched by the Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Professor Muhammad Ali Pate, are designed to accelerate progress in health insurance in Nigeria. Pate emphasized that the guidelines will help ensure that more Nigerians have access to health care and expand the affordability of healthcare services, especially for the most vulnerable populations, and also called on states to enroll their formal sectors and provide the required counterpart funding. Similarly, the Director General of the NHIA, Professor Mohammed Sambo, explained that the guidelines clarify the roles and responsibilities of stakeholders and support the principles of equity, quality, and sustainability. In response to the looming threat of nationwide flooding, President Bola Tinubu has issued directives to develop an extensive plan to address the imminent nationwide threat of flooding. According to the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Communications, Office of the Vice President, Governor Yahaya Bello of Kogi has been appointed as the chairman of the committee to craft a comprehensive plan to tackle this issue, while Senator Akon Eyakinyi, the Deputy Governor of Akwa Ibom State, was appointed Vice Chairman. The committee is expected to submit its recommendations within 7 days. The president also emphasized the urgency of addressing the imminent threat by taking prompt action on all available reports. The Nigerian government is set to introduce a bill to regulate the country's social media space, citing concerns that it has become uncontrollable. The Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission, NBC, Balarabe Ilela, revealed this during a meeting with the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris. The bill aims to repeal and reenact the current NBC Act to include provisions for social media regulation, among other updates. The bill seeks to address this gap and give the Commission the necessary powers to regulate digital broadcasting services, ensure quality audio and video content, and efficiently manage the spectrum. The bill has been presented to the National Assembly for consideration. So talking about developments from Nigeria, the Nigerian Air Force NAF has received 2 additional Diamond 62 DA-62 aircraft in Ilorin, Kwara State as part of the 4 procured by the federal government 2 years ago. The Chief of the Air Staff, CAS, Air Marshal Hassan Abubakar, expressed his gratitude to the government for their commitment to revamping the NAF's capabilities and ensuring peace in troubled areas, adding that more aircraft, including the M346FA and AH-1Z Super Cobra, will be delivered soon. During the ceremony, Governor Abdulrazak Abdulrahman commended the NAF and other security agencies for their efforts in addressing the nation's security challenges. Now moving to other parts of Africa, Rwanda has reported significant progress in the development of a manufacturing plant for mRNA-based vaccines. The plant, established in Kigali Special Economic Zone, is being built using RSO-sized shipping containers and is expected to be operational by the end of the year, focusing on vaccine research, therapeutics, and manufacturing. In addition to the manufacturing plant, Rwanda's FDA is working towards achieving maturity level 3 recognition from the World Health Organization, WHO. The country is also constructing a dedicated FDA laboratory as part of its commitment to creating an environment conducive to medical and pharmaceutical research. These measures align with Rwanda's ambition to increase vaccine production and enhance its healthcare system's resilience. Now, in response to soaring food prices and the need to enhance food security, Rwanda's Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources, Edefonse Musafiri, says all vacant arable land across the country will be temporarily allocated to residents for agricultural cultivation. As part of the initiative, landowners will be approached, and if they are unwilling or unable to utilize their land for food production, it will be temporarily assigned to residents who are prepared to cultivate it. Musafiri emphasized that the program does not involve confiscating land from its owners, but rather aims to tap into the potential of underused land for food production. In addition to allocating land to residents, efforts to combat soil erosion are seen as crucial to achieving successful outcomes. Members of Parliament emphasized the need to address erosion and provide residents with necessary seeds to ensure optimal crop yields. Let's turn now to stories from other parts of the globe. A plan to establish a special cluster in Abu Dhabi to develop smart and autonomous vehicles across land, sea and air has been approved. Abu Dhabi aims to solidify its position as a leader in innovative industries and cutting-edge technologies by forming strategic alliances, attracting top talent from around the world, utilizing advanced technology, building a supportive ecosystem, and promoting sector expansion. The creation of the SAVI cluster will capitalize on Abu Dhabi's strengths in aviation and aerospace, leveraging its advanced technological infrastructure and thriving R&D environment. The cluster has received the backing of Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and Chairman of the Abu Dhabi Executive Council, and the project is expected to create 30,000 to 50,000 jobs and have an economic impact of 90 to 120 billion dirham. Thousands of travelers faced disruption as all flights were suspended Wednesday at London's Luton Airport after a fire tore through a newly built parking garage, destroying vehicles and partially collapsing the structure. 4 firefighters and an airport employee were treated for the effects of smoke inhalation after the fire, which broke out. Officials at the airport, which is located about 56 kilometers north of central London, said emergency crews remained at the scene as a precaution, but travelers were starting to return to the terminal. In another development, in its ongoing efforts to alleviate financial burdens on American consumers, the Biden administration has unveiled a proposed rule aimed to address the issue of junk fees. Under this rule, businesses would be required to upfrontly disclose mandatory fees, ensuring transparency for consumers. Additionally, banks have been instructed not to impose excessive charges for basic information like account balances. The Federal Trade Commission, FTC, is also taking steps to combat concealed fees by proposing a new rule that would prohibit such fees in sectors such as car renters, hotels, and even ticket providers. Let's take you now to China, where the country is promoting its Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, as an alternative model for economic development, emphasizing the program's successes while downplaying criticism of excessive debt in poor countries. The BRI, championed by President Xi Jinping, has funded various infrastructure projects worldwide, but concerns have been raised about the high debt burdens faced by recipient countries. Despite the criticism, Chinese officials hailed the BRI's achievement in promoting international cooperation and transcending geopolitical games. The BRI, launched 10 years ago, has primarily supported projects undertaken by Chinese construction firms and financed through loans from Chinese development banks. Now, while the initiative has provided much-needed funding to developing countries, it has also led to growing concerns over mounting debts. Chinese-funded power plants have contributed significantly to carbon dioxide emissions, exacerbating climate change issues. However, China is now shifting its focus to smaller projects and renewable energy as part of the BRI's evolution. And that's it on the Morning News Update on SIG News. Thank you for your time. I'm Blessing AJ. Stay for the rest of Early Exchange. Good morning.
Wise men. Iconic sculptures and statues adorn major metropolitan cities of the world. In Lagos, Nigeria, the statue of 3 men designed to depict the state's cultural heritage and to usher in visitors and tourists into the ever-accommodating center of excellence is no doubt an astounding work of art. Originally built under the administration of Colonel Raji Rasaki, designed by Bodu Shodende in 1991 and standing over 12 feet high, referred to as Agba Meta or Aro Meta, the 3 sculptured chiefs were placed along the Lagos-Ibadan toll gate to welcome people coming into Lagos State. The statue called the Three Wise Men by many has become a major signature for the state. Three white-capped chiefs clad in white wrappers, knotted across their shoulders and with clenched right fists are shown in the artwork. The images fascinate and create impressions in the minds of visitors coming into the state, captivating the attention of visitors who look with keen interest, pondering on the messages which the posture of the engraved images signifies. The Three Wise Men has been relocated thrice from its original position at Ojodu Berger end of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway to Magodo area before its final relocation to its present site at Olowopopo Drive. The sculpture has suffered severe damages over the years and renovated. Bodun Shodende, through this sculpture, depicted the highest honor that can be afforded to anyone in the Eko-greeting tradition. The Three Wise Men, Arometa, Suk, Enlightenment.
Does it stop at giving a directive? What should be done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Glad you have joined us on Early Exchange. It's time for news analysis where we review the major headlines for today, and to shed more light and to fleshing up the analysis, I'm being joined by our in-house analyst. We have Idahosa Osamaze. Good morning, and how are you today?
Morning, Femi. Good morning. Blessing. Good morning, our viewers.
Yeah, it's a good day.
It is. And I think you shared the memo to Idahosa.
Yeah.
Because I can see
the touch.
Yes.
No, we make it exclusive this time around.
Oh my God.
It's good.
All right, let's start with our president, who is always in the news. This time around is a season of appointment, you know. The president will have to bring people on board who he feels will help him to deliver the dividends of democracy to Nigeria. So this time around, the president has appointed CEOs to various agencies under the Federal Ministry of Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy. There are various agencies, agencies under that ministry. You have NCC, you have NIPOST, and then there's a need to have chief executive, manning those agencies. And this time around, the president has thought it necessary to appoint those people. Yesterday there was argued about the fact that, my concern was the issue of cost of governance. Now, why do we have to keep having appointments, series of appointments? But his submission was that there's a need to have those people on board, to add value. I hope he's still sticking to that submission.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think these are all statutory appointments because head of agencies in government circles sometimes have to stay for 4 years, depending on which agency. And what the president had done is just to say that reconfirming those who have been there, and then, of course, appointing those whose tenure has elapsed. So these agencies are also very critical, and especially when the president has promised the nation that he wants to generate about 1 million jobs from that space, and looking out for people with fresh idea to drive the process. And this, for me, are the things that is worth celebrating, that we have new blood introduced into the digital space in Nigeria, and people who have some experience to share. Take, for example, Nkechi has been somebody that had been there within the industry, heading sales, especially for Meta, from Facebook, for Middle East and Africa. That tells you the kind of positions that she holds in that area. And of course, bringing that kind of experience to bear with our Niger concert is something that is welcome. And I also think that Kashifu has done well in NITDA, so the president decided to retain him. So which means, of course, the president celebrates people who do well, and also looking for fresh blood to drive the process so that we can actually get to where we should be as a nation.
For me, I think, like you said, it's statutory. These people, they have, a time frame that they ought to be there, and there's a need to have new ones. And for those who have done well, there's a need to say, oh, yeah, you've done well. Like they often say, the reward for good job is more work. And so this time around, they'll be given more responsibility to live up to that response. I'm expecting from, agency like NCC, like NIPOST, I'm expecting more from them, especially NIPOST. In fact, because when you look at the issue that has to do with data in Nigeria, it's something that's been of concern. How much people charge on data, you spend on data. And then there's a need to work on that. So I'm expecting more from these agencies, these executives that are coming on board, to see what they can do to make that ministry better, or the agencies that they are handling, to ensure that their responsibilities are done well, and Nigeria will be better for it. Because this ministry has to do with something with the young people. Has to be, most young people, they are in the digital space. And so every policy that we have come with now will affect the young people, and I'm passionate about the young people. So also about the older people.
The dimension, sorry, Blessing. The dimension for me here really is something that we must also look at. That President wasn't looking at for core professionals in some of these agencies. Yes. Now, when you are having Niger concert headed by a salesperson, not a technology person, it tells you where, of course, the thinking is for the president.
Revenue generation.
You can imagine that. Look at the guy that is replacing Professor Dambata from Nigeria Interbank Settlements. You see the dimension. So we are looking at it not from the point of view that you're having a core technological person, but you're also looking at it from the point of view that these are critical investments that should generate revenue for government. So it's also important to look at it from that dimension, that government is not just looking at for technical. The last time I was speaking with one of our friends, and he said, look, that the time had come for us in Nigeria that we should not be appointing professors as vice chancellor of university. We should be appointing salespeople, real sales professional who can sell the university. Because when you have core professionals doing things, they can be thinking about what you are going to invest, but they may not be looking at the revenue side. Now, when you have real business people champion the university, he said, Nigeria will just be beautiful for it. Because those who are there, they also ask government for money, but they are not thinking of how to create money from the system. And I think probably this is what is in the mind of the president, looking at people who have these competencies around sales and see how we can drive these agencies to begin to generate revenue for the nation.
And I think that's the way, that will also enable them be productive, because when they have a target or they are looking towards revamping the system to be attractive and to make sales, it means that you are being productive, because what then would you sell to the people? So it's a way to make it more efficient. We can only hope for the better, particularly for NCC, as Femi has mentioned, with the data cost and everything. Regulation in that sector, it's one thing that we're looking to see, and even new innovations with NIPOST, because it seems to be a thing that is not so much used, or a sector that is not so much used. So let's see the new innovations that can come up there.
Now talking about NIPOST, you remember Kazuari?
That caught your attention.
Oh yes, from the National Assembly, where he had alleged that stamp duty, which is under the purview of NIPOST, over 89 trillion was missing. That was in the news throughout last year, until he was removed as secretary to the Presidential Committee on stamp duty. Now, which suggests to us that there are some things there. Revenue is actually supposed to be coming from NIPOST. To what extent it gets into the Federation account, and he said it was just money for the boys. I remember that there was a day Kazuari was in Berekete to push this, and was challenging the CBN governor to come up with fact that he was lying. And he said that there were a whole lot of moves in that area to cover up this sort of crime. And I think that it's also important that CBN is under serious purge. At least let NIPOST also have a new head. Probably some new things may also come out.
We hope
Who
so.
knows?
All right, away from digital economy, let's look at the health sector. This time around, the federal government has unveiled operational guidelines for the new NHI Act, which empowers the National Health Insurance Authority to govern, regulate, and enforce matters related to health insurance in Nigeria. The issue related to health insurance in Nigeria, it's at the border now. You know, statistics show that less than 10% of Nigeria, the population of Nigeria, has, have access to health insurance. You imagine if our population is about 200 million and almost less than 10%, have access to health insurance. If you look at the figure, it's very encouraging. But now the federal government has unveiled new plans to empower the health authority to ensure that they expand that net for Nigerians to be able to benefit from health insurance. The practice is you see people paying out of their pocket, for health services, unlike in the other client where you depend or you fall on your health insurance to cover those things. What do you think?
Well, I think it's something that we really need to look into, really. I as a person, had actually believed that we have really not leveraged the benefit and positive that the insurance industry brings to nations, especially where we live in an environment where people are very fatalistic about life. And so they don't see the need for insurance. I was saying to a group of religious people on Sunday, the need to factor into labor relations national health insurance scheme, because it's critical. People feel, oh, I won't be sick, God forbid, but sometimes you can be sick. And once you take that burden away from people, you have actually intervened. I remember saying this some weeks back on this studio, that we need, as a matter of urgency, to have a national law that mandates every Nigerian to take insurance, especially in the area of health. And that will bring a whole lot of succor to our system. That will bring improvement to the health sector. Because you see, if we have this running, we can actually monetize public hospitals. So that if you have the vulnerable in society insured for health, government can take statistics. This is where, again, we have to go to data collection. You have the vulnerable in your society. Give them health plans. Small one. People are dying of malaria. They can't even afford 4,000 to go and do checks. These are real issues that affect us as a people. And so government can afford. Take, for example, this one we're talking about palliative, and we are going to spend 5,000 or 20,000 for these vulnerable 50 million people as health insurance for them. You know what that will mean? It will mean that if these people that are vulnerable are sick, they can access medical care. Now, if they are accessing medical care, it also brings money into the industry. So the health sector will be revamped. So this is important, and I think this is the area actually where government needs to do plenty of intervention. So for me, it's a welcome development that government is thinking around that line, because most of the things we are thinking that happen in abroad, they are actually issues that have to do with insurance. And that's why you see most of the time, especially during COVID-19, you see most Western countries had to intervene in the insurance industry and give them bailout because of the level of casualty that COVID-19 brought. And this would have wiped out a whole lot of insurance companies in the West. So this is important for us. And as a nation, we must pursue this, that at least let every Nigerian, at least those who work also, get this benefit. So that if they are sick of malaria, they can go to the hospital. If they have things that will make them to go see a doctor, they will not be afraid to go do checks when they are not feeling healthy.
Yeah, because the non-availability of fund is the reason why some people wait until the illness has got into a critical stage and then they have no option than to go to the doctor. But because there is no money, they tend to want to manage situations. But if there is insurance, by the time people don't feel unwell, even when they feel well, there is need for regular checks. It will encourage people to take care of their health more. And I like the fact that the coordinating Minister of Health is encouraging states to enroll their formal sectors and also provide the counterpart funding. So let's begin from that part. But the informal sector should also be strongly considered and brought into it, because it is then left to individual discretion whether or not to take up insurance plan. But when there is a plan that makes it easy for those in the informal sector to key into, I believe more people will see the need for it, because I think everyone likes the ease when you get you go to the hospital and maybe it's 50% that your insurance covers. It's a relief. It's a relief.
Yeah, it is a relief. But you see, again, like I said, we are people of faith, and people feel that when you take insurance, you're actually praying for bad things. And I think the people must be educated that insurance is not a prayer. It's just a measure. Because whether we like it or not, those days will come. Like they say, even sickness itself is therapeutic. Because it helps you to balance up your system. But it has to be managed when it comes, so that people are not unnecessarily taken by it. So this for me is what is important, that our public out there understand that insurance is for your good. And you're not just benefiting somebody, because the time will come. You may say, oh, I paid premium this year and I was not sick, I didn't go to hospital. But you will understand that when you pay premium this year, next year, even in 2 years, and when that thing happens, you discover that what is expended to look after you is not equal to what premium ever you're paying. So the cost benefit analysis still makes insurance an option for every Nigerian.
All right. Let's take a short break now, and we'll return shortly to have more analysis. Just stay with us.
Giving a directive, what should be done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is early exchange, shaping policy, advancing the development.
All right, welcome back. Let's go ahead with the news analysis, and this time around we're looking at the plan by the federal government to introduce a bill to regulate the social media space. You're aware that the social media space is largely unregulated, and the federal government this time around is thinking of introducing a bill to create sense of responsibility. And the bill it does this time around is to empower the NBC, the Nigerian Broadcasting Commission, to be able to regulate that space. As we speak, the NBC doesn't make that provision, so there's a need for amendment, and that bill has been sent to the National Assembly to ensure that the NBC regulates the social media, especially when it comes to broadcast materials, audio, video quality. At a point, I remember when the former Minister of Information, that's Lai Mohammed, this bill was also introduced then, and a lot of Nigerians kicked against the impression that, okay, perhaps it's another way to cage people from, expressing their views when it comes to the social media space. That's just the only space where people can just speak or express their view at will. But this time around, this bill is to find a way to curtail, some sense of irresponsibility where you just see people churning out contents that are not being regulated, poor quality. And so the NBC is going to be empowered this time around to regulate that space to ensure that broadcast equipment, audio, video have good quality. What's your view, Dowser?
Oh, yeah. Incidentally, yesterday evening, I was hanging out on a Twitter space, X space, with some journalists who were having a conversation after the BBC report on the CSU challenge that has been there. And a lot of people were making very wonderful submission in that space yesterday. And somebody said that, you see, the problem we have is that we are having so many people without journalistic experience and exposure in the space. No thanks to the fact that following is rewarded in the social media space. That you have a lot of people who are in that space who are trying to drive traffic towards their handle, and they engage themselves in unethical practices. These people are deliberate because they want to pull out something sensational that will attract people to their handles. It's not even in area of quackship now. Now, this is an unethical economic practice that should not really be encouraged. And I think the time is actually now that we should know that broadcast or journalism, as it were, has a critical role of informing and educating society toward progress, not to create division or create tension in society. This is not the whole idea, and this is where, for me, regulation become very important. Yes, you say people have freedom of expression, but don't forget that if you have a freedom of expression, I also have a freedom to be protected. Libel or slander is an offense. The fact that you have a freedom to express yourself does not give you the free hand or liberty to write or say things about me that are not true. And I think people must be very conscious about this. You see, but because of this herd mentality that this new generation of people who are in the social media carry, they tend to play down the issue of ethics and morality, and then begin to champion a cause and pushing an agenda against individuals who are trying to ensure that there is sanity in that space. And I think NBC need to do a lot in that area to see how we can ensure that people who are throwing out content, that number one, they have the right training, they have the right equipment to do so that we don't create unnecessary tension and chaos in society.
I will look at it from two different angles. One, there is a need to regulate the space to bring some sanity and to ensure professionalism. But on the other side, there is the worry about over-regulation. which has been the fear of people. Now, we've not seen what the amendments to the Act will be, but I'm hoping that it doesn't become a situation where it becomes over-regulated and begins to stifle whether journalistic practice, or it begins to make the social media space a very stifled environment. But let's see what will happen and hope that the amendment brings on some sanity and enable people understand that when you're communicating, it's a two-way thing. There is the sender part and there is the receiver part. You don't just consider your part because of the profit you will make. You also need to consider the impact that what you're sending out will have on people, because you are shaping opinions of people and there are consequences for it. However you shape the opinion of people, whether it's in the positive side, there is a consequence. If you're shaping their opinion towards the negative, there is also a consequence for it. So until people become conscious of that and begin to do things responsibly, then we can now say, yes, we are getting there. So I think there's need for NBC to come in, but it should not be an over-regulation.
Yeah, but you should understand, when you're looking at, what NBC is just looking at is issues not to be broadcast, NTB. Because there are things that you can put on screen. Sometimes you see very gory pictures on social media. I don't want to see a picture of a dead person or people who is mutilated. But you see it circulating everywhere. This is offending sensibilities. And I think these are the real issues that people need to look out for. That the issue is, if this bill is going to happen, and of course it's going to be done, it should be at the National Assembly. Then of course there are also room and provision for public hearings, where those who are concerned can actually come out to say what is right. But I think the time is now. And somebody was saying that even within the media space, there are so many non-professionals who are in the space and they really do not understand the basics and ethics of journalism. And all they're doing is that they just feel that as a journalist you can say anything because of freedom of expression. And I think this training is important, that people understand there are things to be broadcast and there are things not to be broadcast. And once this space is actually sanitized, then we can be sure we will get good quality information on both the social and the conventional media space.
All right. I think that was, I said it all. I don't need to compliment that. Okay, so let's move on to another story that has to do with our president, which is in response to the looming threat of nationwide flooding. The president has issued directives to develop an extensive plan to address the imminent nationwide threat of flooding. You know, a few days ago we talked about the issue of the dam in Cameroon, which is talking about the imminent flooding in Nigeria, and the alert that was given that for neighboring states to prepare for that, you know, development. And now the president is giving directive in that regard. Maybe I will use the word being proactive now to ensure that this effect is being mitigated. It won't affect all the states and all the neighboring villages. That was what do you think? Imminent flooding.
Yeah, I think there's a whole lot that needs to be done, and this is again where leadership is important. That we are not just fighting fire, that it is important for us as a people to start to prevent fire. Because when it's less expensive to prevent fire than to fight fire, which is what we are used to. You know, they call it the fire brigade approach to all issues. So we know that this threat is there. And this is where people are talking about, again, infrastructures. That take, for example, the Benue River needs to be dammed. We need to do the dredging around our waterways in the River Niger and River Benue axis. So that when, of course, the rain season comes, or the dam is opened in Cameroon, we are able to absorb it here, so it doesn't enter into society. Now, this conversation has been on for a very long time. And this is what a lot of people have even spoken to, that when Cameroon was building their dam, there was this understanding between Cameroon and Nigeria that whatever water that is outlet from the other side, that of course the dam in Benue area will be able to accommodate it. Now Cameroon built their dam, but we have not built ours. So I think that we must begin to invest in basic infrastructure. The last time we said it again here on this show, when Blessing was saying, it's not just about talking about warning people. There must also be structure in place so that if there are these emergencies where people can stay, this has to be a holistic plan, that we know that these areas are prone, and then government is also having a pre-crisis arrangement that says in case it happens, we have this alternative where we can easily, quickly relocate people to temporarily until the events are over. So this for me is important, because in crisis management, you have pre-crisis, you have crisis, and you have post-crisis management. Now this for me should be like a post-crisis event where we are evaluating what damages the flood has done in the past. And then on the basis of this understanding and knowledge, we are able to produce or provide measure to address those threats.
Yes, I like that President Tinubu wants to take measures to forestall the threat or to minimize the impact of the threat of flooding, because it will happen. Cameroon will release the waters, and I think they're even kind enough to give us warning or alert us whenever they want to do that. So let's see what will happen. Let's see how solid what the president plans to do will be in ensuring that the impact is minimized, and then going forward, whenever there are future occurrences, it doesn't create a situation of tension, because trust me, those in flood-prone areas are already panicking because they know what they usually encounter at such times. So let's see what happens.
You know, once that happens, you know, there's a need to always find a way to manage crisis. It's quite important. And like Idauza said, then the dam itself, there's what we call a buffer dam, which Nigeria ought to have provided. You know, this dam has been in existence since 1982. And now if between now and then we can't be able to provide our own buffer dam at some of the states, Benin and some of the neighboring states, it comes for concern. And I think this is what the federal government should prioritize now, that this thing is becoming a periodical thing, if I'm virtually an annual thing, whereby these waters are going to be released. And so for me, I'm looking for that opportunity for the federal government to address this, to be proactive. You know, like he said, you know, you have crisis management, and then you have post-crisis management. Part of what should also be done is provision to relocate people, because some people will have to relocate. Of course. Whether you like it, they have to, because in the lowland, they are prone to this kind of flooding. So they have to be relocated, like states like Kogi State and some in Benue State. And I'm happy the governor of Kogi State now is now being put in charge, the committee in charge of, you know, managing that crisis. So let's see what will come out of it. And I pray that no life will be lost this time around. All right, let's switch to Rwanda, where there's a new development now.
Interesting development.
Interesting one, you know. The president has given instruction or a directive that lands, you know, should be taken over, you know, idle lands should be taken over by government or handed over to individuals who want to use it for agri purpose. You agree with me that when it comes to the contribution of agri to GDP or to the economy, especially when it comes to Africa, even the rest of the world, is huge. But to encourage farming, to encourage, you know, commercial agriculture, and to also mitigate the effect of food prices, the president has given the directive that land should be taken over for agri purposes, so that at least it will have food production in that country. Idauza, how do you say this?
Well, of course, Rwanda has become the bride in Africa, and you see proactivity in terms of governance. And you know, I usually speak to that issue. They don't play with that, their animal stuff, because the hide and skin is actually the power behind their leather industry. And so they don't allow pomo to be eaten anyhow. So when you kill your cow, you skin it. And all these things is just to see how to invest in all the value chain of agriculture and see how
to be done to ensure that this is done.
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. for you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Is Jen on or light?
All right, it's the early exchange, and we must apologize for that interruption. But you know, we are still here, and the discussion continues with our news analysis. Idauza, you were saying you were sharing your thoughts as regards the plan by the president of Rwanda, to encourage production and then production of food in order to be able to improve food production in that country. The directive now is for the government to take over some, idle lands in order to use them for food production. So continue your thoughts in that line.
Yeah, like I said, you see, in economies, you leverage on the areas where you have comparative advantage. And this is where, of course, we as Africans really over time had not demonstrated this. That you still see a lot of Africans bringing food from the outside. That's what I'm saying. You see, what Rwanda has done under Paul Kagame is to see how to exemplify strategic leadership in Africa. He has done that successfully with IT. He created an IT hub where you have one university in Rwanda. And every other university become like a college of the University of Rwanda. Now, in that space, what they have done is that they brought in that university in there, brought financial in there, and then you have innovation and you have fabrication. So within that hub, you see, they are able to create and even get financing for whatever thing they are doing for ICT. That has been perfected and it's working. It's like a model for the whole of Africa. Now he's turning into a Greek. And that was the point I was making earlier. That you see, again, even in terms of hide and skin, which is critical, the leather industry in Rwanda is giving them so much money. And there's a legislation that you cannot take out skin from Rwanda. You can sell the meat outside. But that pomo that we eat here, you can't sell it outside. So because this, of course, is also very critical, that you're seeing an industry that is booming. We talk about Italian leather, and we have so much animal here, and we don't have African leather. I think for me, it's a welcome development. Kagame has been pioneering a lot of efforts to see how to transform a third world African nation into a first world.
All right, on that note, we can call it a wrap on our news analysis. Idauza, thank you so much for joining us on this segment.
Always my pleasure to be here.
All right, let's go on a short break. When we return, we'll start our discussion on pension reforms. Stay with us.
In many countries, the Pension Reform Act serves as the cornerstone of pension systems, setting the framework for retirement planning. It mandates contributions from both employers and employees to pension funds, ensuring access to a secure retirement income. Compliance with this act is crucial, as non-compliance can lead to penalties and jeopardize future financial stability. Effective pension fund management is equally vital, as professional fund managers aim to grow assets while managing risk through diversification and prudent investment decisions. Beyond traditional employer-sponsored pension schemes, individuals have various opportunities to secure their financial future. They can explore investments like stocks, bonds, real estate, and mutual funds, diversifying their portfolios to mitigate risk and potentially achieve higher returns. Voluntary contributions to pension funds increase overall savings, enhancing financial security during retirement. Governments often offer tax incentives for retirement savings, making it important to understand these benefits to optimize contributions and tax liability. Seeking advice from financial experts or retirement planners can further tailor retirement plan to individual needs and goals. Ultimately, compliance with the Pension Reform Act is essential, laying the foundation for retirement planning in many countries. Wise investment choices, strategic contribution planning, and understanding tax incentives provide individuals with the means to enhance their retirement prospects. A well-thought-out retirement plan today ensures a comfortable and secure tomorrow. Alfreda Ambebasi for Souk News.
The petrol is still imported because local refineries are not working.
Did stop at giving a directive? What should be done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, welcome back. Our focus today will be to look at the Pension Reform Act and compliance in Nigeria, and then to also look at retirement plans. If you plan to retire soon, what do you need to put in place to ensure that you have a good time when you're retired? And to shed more light on this and to provide a better perspective, we're being joined by Sam Horuwije, the Director of Research and Policy, Femi Wash. So I'm glad to have you join us on Edexing this
morning. Good morning, Femi. My pleasure to be here. And good morning, Blessing.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, let's look at pension reforms in Nigeria. Oh, take us through that journey, for us to understand what the pension used to be and the reforms that have taken place over the years, and what is the idea now, or what is obtainable now when it comes to pension reforms in Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much indeed. I think the reform date back to 2004 under the Obasanjo administration. The Pension Act, the first one came in 2004, called the Pension Act 2004, essentially about contributory pension, where employer and employees has some percentage contribution. But currently, the ratio of contribution has improved from 2004 through to 2014, and there's a new amendment in 2022. So employers are expected to contribute a minimum threshold of 10%, while the employee is expected to contribute about 8% minimum. So that means the law has put a minimum threshold, so it can be better. But the law, you can go beyond as an employer 10%, then the employee less than 8%. So that again has really helped, because the law itself equally gives some leeway for employees to have, to a very large extent, a control of their savings account. They have the right to choose whoever manages their pension. So in a nutshell, this reform has been most beneficial to employees. If you look at what happened before 2004, you had a various chaotic regime. Nevertheless, there are challenges in terms of employers able to stay on course in terms of remitting the contributions to the savings or pension administrators.
All right, for the contributions made by both the employers and the employees over time, it doesn't, the way the scheme is designed, the pension scheme, you who is contributing or for you who the money is being saved, you cannot have access to the money until a particular time, or you're allowed to have only 25% of the money. Do you think that's the way it should be? If money is being saved for me or I'm contributing towards savings, shouldn't I be allowed to have access to it when I need it?
The framers of the law envisage that this money you're contributing is essentially meant for your retirement. Therefore, you have access to the fund based on what is in the Pension Act. Once you are 50, you have an access. If you have what you call voluntary retirement, then at that point in time, maybe within 4 months after that, you can have 25% of that contribution. Then the remaining will be program, what you call program pension, based on the calculation, based on your age. So I think the intention of the framer of that law is that when you have retired, you have some money that you can spend in retirement. So it's not in an open capacity where you just have access. So the law find a way to protect you when you retire, particularly from the age of 50.
All right. According to statistics released by the Nigerian Pension Commission, about 24,000, less than 24,000 employers have gotten, insurance and pension, for their workers. What's your reaction to this level of compliance? And do you think we can still do more with this figure?
When you look at compliance, I think we're way very low in terms of compliance. Even some employers do not even remit the contributed money sometime. And when people leave those jobs, the Pension Commission is inundated with a lot of petition for employers who refuse to remit such monies. But I think with more education, a lot of people are coming into the contributory pension scheme. And I do hope with the level of education, there will be improvement in the way people respond in terms of what they can put aside when they retire from active service.
All right, again, let's look at the design or the structure of the pension scheme. Now, money is being put together for the workers so that by the time they retire, they can get, they have something to fall back on. But we realize that with inflation and how time changes, just putting money away is not really a very smart kind of investment or smart thing to do, because whatever you put together at the time they retire may not be so significant to give them a head start in life. Is there a way to revamp or restructure it in a way that is not just savings, it is also investments?
I disagree with you to some extent. Inflation is there, there's no doubt about that, but the money that is put into the savings, they are custodians of people who invest those money on behalf of those contributions that has been made. And over time, you have return on investment, which on an accrual basis adds to what you have contributed. I agree that inflation may take some part, but if you look at the statement that is sent to you by your pension saving manager, you see that on an accrual basis, you have returns on the initial money. Maybe you have maybe 5 million savings at a point. You see some element where you have interest regime that the money has earned over a period of time. And there's even a leeway, even from the government, to borrow from those money, and there are interests that are paid. So over time, your money, in terms of what you put aside, like a normal savings, will earn some money for you. So the idea is to bring you to some level of comfort in retirement, and I think that law adequately caters for people in retirement. But then there's even a portion in the law that allow you to make an additional contribution beyond what your employer and what you contribute within the framework of what the company provides for you. You can do additional savings in that. And at the point of retirement, you can put your money into annuity when an insurance company, you have more money rather than the program one. So there are options that are okay. But then people need to have more education to understand the framework that is beneficial to them.
Let me ask, are there people who are exempted from pension scheme?
No, the law is both for public and private sector. I don't really see a provision that make an exemption, but I do know that there are companies that have a pool of funds that they manage on behalf of their employee that are like a pension scheme. So I think within that framework, I think the law support to a very large extent for the purpose of marketing. I won't mention some companies. There are some big companies that have a pool that they manage on their own. So when people exit, then they give it to a finance company to manage on behalf of that, of the company that does that. But the law cut across public and private sector.
Why I ask the question is there are people who have this mindset that, okay, why do I need to wait till when I'm retired? I need funds to do business now. Why can't I have access to it maybe after a year or more? Do you think there's need to have that provision under the pension scheme?
In my personal view, I don't think so. The law just try to protect people when they retire. The other means of saving. So in line with your retirement planning, whatever retirement goal, financial goal that you have, you can do other investment portfolios that meets your interest beyond the pension contributory scheme. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you can make your financial goals based on your own personal decision, and you can make other investment options.
Okay, let's look at the management of the contributions being made. Are there provisions or guidelines that ensure the protection of these contributions? We've seen in the past where these monies were mismanaged, and at the time the workers became pensioners, needed them, they weren't available. And very recently, we also saw the government borrow from the contributions, which the National Assembly is investigating or wanted to investigate. So, are there provisions that ensure the protection of this fund? Because if a person is contributing right now and they don't turn 50 or turn 60 until maybe another 20, 30 years, what is the guarantee?
Yeah, PENCOM is a regulatory agency in charge of contributing pension scheme. I think there are provisions in the law that protects the contributors. Then there are also provision in the law that allow people to borrow funds from those investments, and I'm sure so far those who have borrowed from those funds are able to return those funds, and those funds has helped to reflate the economy into other sectors where those monies are not immediately needed. So those provisions, those guarantees, the law adequately take care of that. I think my only challenge in terms of compliance is that some employers of labor are unable to contribute as at when due and pay those money into the savings account of their employees. And I do know PENCOM too has an oversight function where they call people out who have not been able to do those contributions to the savings accounts of employees.
But in spite of that, you still see some employees, defaulting when it comes to remittance of, pension funds, what can still be done to ensure that sense of responsibility that you collect the money, you have to remit to the PFAs, because the PFAs are in position to administer or keep these funds, and then before it gets to the central pool. So
I think it's a major challenge. Even the government itself has not been responsible in terms of meeting those obligations. So I think PENCOM, that has the regulatory framework for oversight function, must do their job to call people to order that have not made their contribution, and all the necessary sanctions should be imposed on those who don't remit to the PFAs.
Does the employer get the right or the chance to choose the RSA that they want to do business with? For instance, let's say an employer was saving with a particular RSA and then they changed to a different organization. Is there a plan for, or is there provision for the employee rather to say, I want to stick with this, have all my contributions in one place, then have different accounts?
Yes, I think the law adequately make a provision that those who are contributing to the pool have the prerogative to choose the PFA that they want to use. So that's under the law. But again, for administrative expediency, some company, in terms of how they manage their contributions, may want people to use certain provider, but it's the prerogative of the contributor to choose whoever he wants to use. And you have the right under the law to move your fund to a PFA of your choice. The law make adequate provision, but I think for administrative reasons, some company may want to say, these are the people that we're using in terms of this, then kindly do that. So what you can do is that you can make some contribution. At some point, you can find a way to put your money back into your choice of PFA. I think the law is very clear on that.
Let's look at the PFAs. How will you assess their responsibility in, collection and the administration of those funds? You have different PFAs now. Depending on your choice, you can pick whichever you want to pitch your tent with. But how will you assess their level of competence and professionalism?
I think for many of them, they are doing very well. I think they are in line with the provisions of the law. There's no much infraction. I think the issue some of them have is that some of the employers, particularly state governments, that have not made their contributions, they have a challenge in terms of being able to pull those things through. But by and large, I think the PFAs so far from 2005 to date, they've been up to their responsibility in terms of the management of the fund. But then the challenge are the employer. Employers here means government and some private sector that are not able to remit those money. But if you have an interface with your PFA, if there are gaps, they give you a form and you're able to underline the months that your contributions are not coming. So you can place a demand either through yourself or through the provision of a legal person to be able to do a letter and address those issues to PENCOM to help resolve those issues.
Are there penalties or very strict penalties for defaulting employers?
There are, but I think the challenge is PENCOM. To what extent are they been able to put those sanctions through in terms of those defaulters? The provision in the law that says if you default, then there are certain sanctions that. So the regulator must do his job effectively so that there are no infraction into the inability of employers, particularly government in this case, not to remit the funds to the PFAs.
The Pension Act states that once you have up to about 15 employees, you're supposed to come up with a pension scheme. But I'm wondering, why do some employers shy away from, being part of the scheme? And then why do you think some still don't remit these funds? I'm wondering.
I think the challenge
what are the
here,
challenges?
The challenge here is we have a lot of informal sector in our country. The database of those who do businesses are not fully captured. So there are people, even beyond that 15, they even say the reform says that even once you have an employee up to 3, you can make those contribution, can be part of the contribution pension. But the challenge is you have a greater number of business operators in the informal sector. Then in terms of the regulatory agency to be able to pull them into their net is a major challenge. But I think with more education by PENCOM, then even the governing board of the Pension Commission cut across sectors. You have labor, you have all kinds of people within that board. And you even have even the Association of Retired Pensioners. So maybe with more clamor, more people will enroll into that scheme.
Okay, let's look at the contribution that is even made. 10% from the employer, 8% from the employee. Now, in some organizations, the employees do not get pay slip, which shows a breakdown of their entitlements, what they get. So how can they calculate and know, oh, this is actually the exact percentage that my employer is to contribute?
I'm sure that that's not a major challenge. Once you're an employee into a system, the calculations are very upfront. Then you have your account statement that is sent to you. Your contributory amount is itemized in your statement of account. But the structure or your offer or your employment offer, whatever is stated in terms of your earnings, the percentage in terms of what constitutes your basic and other emoluments are stated. So how they apply that, the percentage that is applied to the basic is what you must know from your HR, even if you don't have a pay slip. There's something that you advise at the end of the month that you have been paid your salary. And you have your offer letter where those things are spelled out. So you can manage that personally, you know what you earn. Then 2, your account statement specify what you earn. So you can just juxtapose that based on your earning and you get the calculations.
The reason I ask that because sometimes it's an aggregate payment and people just know in bulk, this is their earning. But the breakdown as to even the basic, some do not even know.
Well, that would be the responsibility of the employee-employer relation. One will not be able to speak to that unless in specific term we have a letter of engagement, then we'll be able to speak to that issue. But I do know for sure that once you have your offer letter, your terms of engagement are spelled out there. And I do know that this money is expressed in terms of your basic earning.
For those who don't still see the need to be part of this scheme, what can be done to encourage them or motivate them or compel them to be part of this scheme?
I think there should be more employer-employee engagement in terms of how people want to plan their retirement. 2, pension, the PENCOM must constantly educate the public on the need to come into the pool so that they can guarantee the future of employees when they leave paid employment. So I think it's a holistic approach that should be adopted so that people can subscribe to the contribution pension scheme.
When we talk about pension, sometimes it's seen as if it's something for the old people or the elderly. And sometimes some young employees do not actually see the need why they should be part of a process like that. But looking at it, is there a time frame for an employee to be engaged with a particular organization before they get enlisted or get enrolled into the pension scheme?
I think there's a provision, not too sure now. Once you are in employment, within 4 months when you are in that employment, there's a need for you to enroll into the contributory pension. So it's not necessarily for old people. It's just a plan that sustains your future when you retire. So people can do voluntary retirement. Once you're 50, you're still able. So it's not necessarily meant for old people. But the challenge and the picture we see in the media space, particularly from those people who were on the old scheme before 2004, you have gory sites of people sleeping around the premises of their employers and trying to do verification to collect their money. But then the beauty of this reform is that your money is in your hands, so to speak. You have what you have contributed, you have your statement, then once you exit employment, from the age of 50, you approach your PFA and you can access your fund. Then whatever is left is programmed for you.
All right. Do you think there are needs for more reforms when it comes to the Pension Act and administration in Nigeria, given the present reality and then, you know, some of the peculiarities around the environment here?
Yes, I think laws are meant to be reviewed in line with current reality. And I took you through recent development in terms of pension. This new reform started in 2004. The law was reviewed in 2014, and there was a new review in 2022. So I think when there are new provisions, if there's a need, when the clamor comes to the National Assembly, some of the provisions will be reviewed in line with current economic reality and circumstances of people as they progress in society.
All right, let's look at retirement planning. But before we do that, we need to go on a quick break and then we'll talk about retirement planning. Stay tuned.
Idumota Market. Eko Idumota, once a residential neighborhood, is home to Idumota Market located on Lagos Island. It is one of the oldest and arguably one of the largest markets in West Africa. Idumota is a historic neighborhood adjacent to the Lagos port that facilitated the slave trade, and later under the British indirect rule, it surrounded to exports that fueled the colonial enterprise. Idumota was also the location of an Armed Forces Remembrance Cenotaph called Soja Idumota, built as a monument to Nigerian soldiers who served with the West African Frontier Force. An Eyo Masquerade statue and a clock tower are also some monuments at Idumota. Idumota Market is so popular that large sales are recorded as early as 7 a.m. The market is made up of hundreds of locked-up shops occupying several multi-story buildings, with some measuring about 5 or more floors. In 2010, the Lagos State government demolished some illegal structures in order to improve vehicular and human movement in and around the markets. During weekdays, the neighborhood of Idumota is densely populated by shoppers, traders, and bus passengers. From the Carter Bridge ascending into Lagos Island, Passengers can see the neighborhood before disembarking at their final destination. Idumota Market accommodates the substantial inflow of imported goods. The bulk of import from abroad are routed first through Idumota and then on to other markets through Nigeria and other West and Central African countries. The energy of private Idumota traders and wholesalers facilitate this activity, where millions of US dollars worth of wholesale is exchanged daily. Idumota Markets, Souk Enlightenment.
The petrol is still imported because local refineries are not working.
Does it stop at giving a directive? What should be done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Many thanks for staying tuned to Early Exchange. Today our focus is on pension and retirement planning. We talked a bit about extensively actually, about the Pension Reform Act, and some education has come from Sam Uroju, who's talked to us about the Pension Reform Act and how workers and employees key into it and how the benefits is spread. All right, let's look at retirement planning holistically. Now, the contribution pension scheme is part of it, but beyond the pension contribution scheme, you talked about the Pension Reform Act having provisions for those who want to make extra contribution apart from what they are mandated by the scheme to contribute. So what other ways can people begin to plan for retirement? What other options are there in addition to the contribution scheme?
Thank you, Blessing. I think indeed, let's just put into perspective, retirement planning, simply put, is the financial goals that you set for yourself towards your retirement. So beyond the contributed pension, what kind of investment options that you want to use to secure your future when you retire? So you have other investment portfolios that are available to you. To what extent do you want to invest in real estate? To what extent do you want to invest on mutual funds? To what extent do you want to put your money into insurance, what you call annuity plan over a period of time? Stock market, even the money market, and the capital market extensively. So what are your goals? So you need to set a retirement plan, and that's what retirement planning is all about.
To pursue a retirement plan, it has to do with funding. I think it's always part of the challenge. We are aware of that, of pension, the funds will be released. But talking about making alternatives, one of the challenges has to do with the issue of finance. So how do you address that? What kind of initiative can be put in place to ensure that maybe at retirement you want to go into business, you are not looking for funds, there are funds you can take advantage of? What kind of arrangement can be made for a retiree to be able to maximize that?
I think one of the most important challenge that we have in this environment is that your retirement planning should actually start from the day you start your job. So you must set some financial goals for yourself. What kind of portfolio of investment do you want to achieve over a period of time? So this gives you a specific way you can plan your future. But then the challenge is that even if you don't have that kind of knowledge, there are people who are in that space who are specialists. So you can get a consultant to look at your earning vis-a-vis your retirement plan or your savings plan. So based on that, you're able to get advisory from financial advisors who understand the various market portfolio in terms of financial planning. They'll be able to advise you which sector that is most appropriate for setting short, long-term investment plan. So if you're able to address that, then even when you want to do a particular business, then you can make savings towards that business, and when they mature, then you can use them for that specific business. So the options are so many. You have endowment funds, you can do 5 years, you can do 10 years, depending on your age. And at the end of that financial cycle, then you can pull resources together. But what is key here is retirement. What will you want to do when you retire, when you are no longer really physically strong enough to do the hustles the way they put it on the street? Then you have those monies that you can access but essentially is a function of your earning, is a function of your financial goal, and is a function of your financial discipline. So those three ecosystem must be sustained for you to have a good retirement plan in place.
What are some of the common mistakes that individuals make towards retirement?
I think generally we have a very difficult regime of our ability to pay ourselves. Those who are in financial planning, personal finance in particular, there's a concept that they use, pay yourself. So what that means is that for every earning that you have, you should pay a minimum of 10% to yourself. And then what this means is that you should put that 10% aside in form of savings. Whatever portfolio you are interested in, it has to be your personal financial decision. So what is key is that people must learn the habit of paying themselves. That's number one. Number two, no money is too small to be saved. So we need to have this kind of financial discipline to always set something aside for the future. So those are some of the mistakes. Then people always feel that the money will always be there, so they don't plan for the rainy day. So if you look at even the function of money, we talk about transaction, precautionary, and all that. So you need to have that kind of mindset to always put something aside for the future. So the mistake is that we always have a feeling, particularly in this climate, it also mentioned earlier in the program, we're a bit fatalistic in our environment. Leave it for God. So let's find a way that God has given us the mind to learn how to manage our resources so that we can keep some little money aside for our future.
What do you make of this development where the Nigeria Union of Pensioners are asking for a living wage of about 40,000 naira for retirees, you know, like the actual minimum wage for those who are active in service? They are also calling for a review, you know, because for those who retired years back, the new minimum wage or the new scale might not cater for them. But now they're asking for a review of 40,000 naira as a living wage for retirees.
Well, that's a very difficult question for me. Tricky, Femi, but I will approach it this way. I do know for sure that there are companies that review their salaries. When those salaries are reviewed, then they dovetail into those who have left the system. I know some. No, for example, Central Bank of Nigeria, that's a public space. They review, once they review their salary, that review affects what they pay to their retirees, a percentage of increase. So when you ask for a blanket 40,000 minimum wage, that might be a difficult, a tall order for employers to look into. But I do know for sure that as soon as reviews are made for certain well-structured environment, that automatically impacts positively on what their retirees take.
All right. Is it just about financial planning when one is talking about retirement planning, or when an individual makes plans ahead of retirement? What about skill acquisition? What is the role of skill acquisition in retirement planning?
All right. Thank you very much. there are some structured environment companies that have schemes in place as a policy in the company where they prepare you for retirement. So you go through some form of skill acquisition training that will sustain you in retirement. But retirement planning is essentially beyond the financial aspect. Then you need to even plan your health, the kind of health scheme that you need to enjoy even in retirement. So it's key that companies must put in their policy statement to prepare people for retirement after people have put so much serving those companies. So when they retire, they'll be able to transit from the current job into a new job regime. So skill acquisition, very good. There are big companies that does that, because sometimes when people even leave paid employment, they find it difficult because they are not in the market space. And when they even make investment in a certain area, within 2-3 years, those money go down the drain because they are not adequately prepared as entrepreneurs to face the challenge in the marketplace.
What do you think, can still be done? Because you discover a lot of people retired and then it's looking like the thing just happened like a breaking news, lack of preparation, and retirement is here. What do you think they can do to manage that phase? Because it could be lonely. You have a situation where people retire, they don't know what to do. So apart from skill acquisition, what other things can they do to manage that phase and to survive that phase?
No, I think preparation must be made for whatever profession or whatever vocation that you are in. Find something to do when you retire. You can make contributions. You can find a way to volunteer. You can belong to community associations where your contributions are needed. So that's will pull you in the direction that will make you to be active and become more beneficial to society. But people should have that mindset that one day, maybe after 30 years or 35 years, they go into retirement. So what do you do in retirement? So if you have a plan to be doing writing, maybe you can do some coaching, spend some hours, then contribute to society. You can even go back to your company if you can want to spend 1 or 2 hours on a pro bono case if the company is not able to offer you money. So you become very active and you spend a longer time. Or you just have sufficient savings on the softer side of it, and you do a lot of holidays. You can, from your savings, do a lot of holidays and go to places of interest, and you can keep yourself happy with those holidays.
All right, talking about when people retire, what's your take on the current retirement age and the years of service? Some are of the opinion that even at that age, some persons are still very fit and can do more, particularly in the academia. Recently, the government is trying to have a plan where people in the health sector, when they retire, they can offer some form of service, maybe on a contract base, and what they'll be paid will be based on what they last earned before they retire. How do you see that?
No, I think it's okay for, in the academia, for example, the retirement age of professors have been increased to 70 years. Those who are in the administrative cadre of the university, that has been increased to 65 years. So that's okay. But then there are other schemes that are valuable in so many spaces in the employment value chain. So one, there are people who are at work and they are still very active. So when they leave active employment, they spend about 2-3 hours like consultants in the medical field. So you are not being paid based on the arrangement that you have with your employer. Some are being paid just the basic of what they were paid when they were in employment. So it's not cast in stone. Depends on the understanding and the configuration of the former employer and what they want from those who are in retirement. But I think people should not be retired until they are really tired. I remember the father of modern management, Peter Drucker, was still very active for over 90-something. He was still supervising the students. So people should not be retired until they are really, really tired. So, but different scheme can be worked out to see that they contribute meaningfully to society, and we can see tap on their varied experience so that we can transit with those knowledge.
How do we address this issue of late payment? You have pensions or gratuities being delayed, and then people have to wait for months, sometimes years. Can't we adopt the policy, pay as you go, pay as you retire?
I think that's essentially management issues, whether in the public sector or in the private sector. The issue of gratuities based on your company policy. You know, and the law, a minimum of 5 years, you'll be entitled to gratuity when you leave employment, some places 10 years. So those monies should be set aside and should not be used for other businesses, and you can put them into a pool of fund that other people can manage on behalf of the company. So when the time is due for people to access their gratuities, they don't have any problem. I think it's essentially a management issues. People should be more disciplined in the way they manage the resources of their employees, so that when they leave, they can be paid promptly their gratuities. I think it's not very healthy for our society where people have put so much, and at the end of the day, they don't have access to their money. But then, the various frameworks that are in place, the government must find a way to prosecute people that do not respect the laws that have been put in place to safeguard employees.
So what role can financial advisors play in assisting with retirement planning?
The problem here is education. You have a lot of people who offer financial advisory services, but people don't even know that they exist there. So I think people should be educated to visit somebody who is an expert in terms of retirement planning, in particular financial service advisory. People who provide service within that space should be consulted so that they can plan your resources. Then people must take advantage of various financial instruments that are in the money and capital market that exist currently. So they can put small money into mutual funds that become as small as 1,000 units in a mutual fund can become something later in the future.
All right, we'll take a breather now, and we'll be right back to discuss more on the issue of pension. Stay with us.
There's been a lot of fundraise, especially in the tech environment in Nigeria, and there's every need to be cautious, not to think that the fundraise itself is the end point. It's a means to an end. If the job is 100%, the fundraise is just 20. There's still 80% to go. So what you certainly do not do is to raise funds and shortly thereafter go onto social media and brag about the brand new car you bought or the apartment you've moved into in Banana Island. It doesn't make for good optics. And unfortunately, when you really need the benefit of doubt, you might not get it from your investors. You don't raise money and then ask, so what should I do with the money? At that time, it's too late, you've lost the plot. When you raise money, you would have raised it based on the back of an agreement with your investor, clearly outlining how the money will be spent and how the returns will come. It's imperative to stick to that plan. And if anything changes in the environment or in the business and you have to pivot or there's going to be a significant change, it's imperative to then get the buy-in of the investor. The investors are not philanthropists. This is what we need to understand. They are not giving grants. The investors are astute businessmen who are not necessarily content with the normal rate of returns of placing money in the bank or buying bonds. And that's why they take the risk of putting their funds in a risky venture such as a startup, which has no track record. What we have to bear in mind is that when the investor gives you any amount of money to invest in the business, come rain or shine, he will typically ask you for 3 times of that in 5 years. So let's do the math. Let's say that I took $1 million as a raise from an investor in, say, 2015, when the dollar was 200 naira per dollar. 5 years on, in 2020, I'll be expected to return to that investor $3 million. $3 million in 2020 at 440 per dollar is about 1.32 billion naira. Now, if you keep the money for longer, then it's even getting more tricky because the exchange rate is falling and you have to do more to pay back. Let's put that figure aside. Bear it in mind, 1.32 billion. If I had approached the bank in 2015 to borrow the same amount of $1 million, at that time it was 200 million naira. So I borrowed 200 million naira. Interest rate is 20%. In 5 years, that's another 200 naira. So what I'll return to the bank will be 200 naira interest plus 200 million naira that I borrowed. I'll be returning 400 million naira. And then compare this in the same period with someone who raised money and has to return 1.32 billion naira. This gives you a sense when I say that raising the money is just the tip of the iceberg. If your business has not reached an inflection point, if your business has not proved this concept, then venture capital money may not necessarily be for you unless there is a match, which means you are earning in the currency that you borrowed in. So you borrowed in dollars and then you are earning in dollars. Or you have what we call a forward contract with a bank to hedge against exchange loss if it is available. But if not, then you take VC money when you have captured the cost of building the business such that any additional customer is a contribution margin. In that case, it makes sense to scale very quickly because every customer is adding to the bottom line. That is when it makes sense to take the VC money because then they are sharing in the profit and they are helping you to grow the business quickly to deliver that profit. Bear in mind, raising money is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. Pursue that end.
Done to ensure that this is done?
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, welcome back. We're still looking at the issue of pension reforms and retirement plans. What you need to do when you retire. One day that day will come. It won't be like a breaking news, but what you need to do now. And that's why Sam is still here with us to give you some tips and some of the things you need to do before you retire. Sam, glad to have you join us.
My pleasure, Femi.
All right. Now let's look at the pension contribution. The statutory is 18%, 10% from the employer, then 8% from the employee. Now, what of in a situation where an employee decides I want to increase the percentage, or an employer is being magnanimous enough to say, okay, can we find a way to increase it from 10%? Is it still possible? And then what kind of provision is available for an employer who feels I need an independent savings? Okay, let me increase from 8% to maybe 10 or 15 or more. Educate us on this.
Yeah, the law already made a provision for that. So if you want to, in addition to the mandatory, there's the actual word in the act, you can approach your PFA and just fill the form. Then you can make additional contribution. But what the law speaks to, or what the act speaks to, is that a minimum of 10%. That shows that you can do better than 10% if you have the financial muscle as an organization to do that. But then the challenge is that most employers are even finding it difficult to even remit their contributions currently. So if you are going to put an additional burden on the 10% that is the minimum threshold, they are not even able to pay that. It becomes another challenge. Let's see how this minimum is sustained over a period of time. And if there's a need to amend the law, then such provision will be made to the National Assembly, and that law will be adjusted accordingly. But individuals are at liberty within law to make a contribution. Even if you have retired and you find yourself working elsewhere, then once you are in the payroll of an organization, then you can start the process all over again to make some new contributions. So there's flexibility in terms of what happened there. And like I said earlier, the contributor is at liberty to do whatever he decides to do within the framework of the law.
Okay, let's look at customer service. What assistance are the PFEs meant to offer, or what assistance should they offer to the contributors in terms of their savings, and even offering advice that will help them make informed investment decisions?
I do know for sure that number one is that they must send a statement of account of contributors to them quarterly, and that is being done. Number two, some are providing additional education in terms of retirement planning. So they have sessions where they prepare contributors to what they can do in retirement. So they are interfacing in terms of education. They are equally providing advisory services on pro bono basis to the contributors. So they are doing very well in that regard. But then when you look at some of the operators, there are some who are really best in class in terms of practice. They are doing well in terms of education, in terms of the statement of account. So customer service for many of them is good, but then some need to scale up the way they attend to their contributors.
All right, what a way to wrap up this discussion. Sam, we want to thank you for sharing your thought with us.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
You've given us insight on what we need to do to plan for our retirement, and that's encouraging. All right, we'll go on a short break now. When we return, we'll still continue our discussion on pension reforms and retirement plans. Just stay with us to get more.
Three Wise Men. Iconic sculptures and statues adorn major metropolitan cities of the world. In Lagos, Nigeria, the statue of three men designed to depict the state's cultural heritage and to usher in visitors and tourists into the ever-accommodating center of excellence is no doubt an astounding work of art. Originally built under the administration of Colonel Raji Rasaki, designed by Bodu Shodende in 1991 and standing over 12 feet high, referred to as Agba Meta or Aro Meta, the three sculptured chiefs were placed along the Lagos-Ibadan toll gate to welcome people coming into Lagos State. The statue called the Three Wise Men by many has become a major signature for the state. Three white-capped chiefs clad in white wrappers knotted across their shoulders and with clenched right fists are shown in the artwork. The images fascinate and create impressions in the minds of visitors coming into the state, captivating the attention of visitors who look with keen interest, pondering on the messages which the posture of the engraved images signifies. The Three Wise Men has been relocated thrice from its original position at Ojodu Berger end of Lagos-Ibadan Expressway to Magodo area before its final.
One of the factors being identified by our key persons is the issue of transportation. For you to have a sustainable city, you must have a deliberate attempt to have a master plan.
This is Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
It's still Early Exchange, where we shape policy and advance development with our conversation, and we've been looking at pension reforms and retirement plans. And you know, the conversation is getting bigger and better, and that's why we're being joined by Idahosa Osamaze. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Glad to have you join us once again. You know, your contribution is always germane, and that's why we're bringing you aboard to look at the issue of pension reforms in Nigeria.
Yeah.
All right, now talk to us. What's your observation about the reforms and the management of pension funds in Nigeria? Of recent, we had a story or a report talking about the federal government borrowing some of these funds for certain reasons, and then the National Assembly is investigating to see how that has been utilized. Talk to us. How do you react to this kind of report on news?
Well, I think in our environment, there are a whole lot of misinformation, especially when it has to do with a public service where trust is very low. That's the way I want to put it. What we must understand is that by the very act itself, the act has prescribed how collection is to be done and how investment is also to be done. And don't forget that the law specifically mentioned that investment of this collected fund can be put into government bonds, into government treasury bills, and other securities. And that's because the law realizes and recognizes that it's safer with government to be able to sell these bills to the administrators and the custodians, and then government, based on its revenue profile, is easier to liquidate these securities and then, of course, make maximum profit for the pensioners. So if the selling of bond securities amounts to borrowing, you know, these are two different things that people will need to know, that whenever government needs to raise funds, they can set treasury bills, they can set bonds, and of course the PFA can actually invest in those funds that government is selling.
All right, looking at the contributory pension scheme over the years, from when the act was made 2004, amended 2014 until now, what's your assessment of its effectiveness?
Well, it will be very premature for us to begin to assess how effective it will be. I remember doing a survey for ARM some years ago. That was in 2007, when the Act was just being put into operation by the then Olusegun Obasanjo regime. And a whole lot of civil servants had plenty of worries about how successful it can be. And these worries were not unfounded, especially given the failure of the contributing pension, especially in America, where a whole lot of backlogs were there, and because of the financial crisis, and you see that what people were putting in, they were really not having substance out of it to sustain people who had left work for the rest of their life. And I think those fears are still there, and that's why you see, even in the last few years, which actually led to the reform of the 2014 revision that repealed the 2004 Act, that the Nigerian Armed Forces and the Secret Intelligence Services were excluded now from the contributory pension because of their peculiarity of their own professions.
Remarkably, it's also important to state that when the reform started in 2004, there was a deficit of about 2.4 trillion, and now the DG is claiming that the funds are now, of course, has increased to about 15 trillion. Now, what do you make of that development? Does that mean that more people are coming into that scheme, and then what can still be done to encourage more people to participate in that scheme?
Yeah, a lot of people have gotten into the net of the pension scheme, the contributory pension scheme. Yes, we have that backlog because government will need to pay gratuity and still continue to pay monthly pensions as at that time. And now it's mandatory by law that if you are on employment, whether in government or private, that has over 15 employees, you are required and mandated by law to have that scheme where, of course, the employer pays some part, like Sam Oroji has said. And, of course, you also, who is the employee, you make some also contribution to this fund. Yeah, my real worry is not about what sum we're talking about here. When we say 15 trillion, it looks a very big sum until it comes to the point of administration, when people are going to take out the chunk. You see, where the real challenge is for the contributory pension scheme, it's not for senior government officials. It's more with the junior government officials. Take, for example, with a minimum wage of about 30,000. And if you were to take 10% of 13,000 is 3,000. And 8% is about 2,800. Now, if you combine that together, that's about 5,000 monthly. And if you have to factor that in contribution for 30 years, you can know what amount that is to. Now, the question is, to what extent will this fund? Because don't also forget the disparity between the minimum wage and the maximum wage. You have some places where people are in this same scheme, they earn over 3 million naira in a month. It's in this 15 trillion. So if I'm earning 3 million naira and I'm going to contribute monthly, so you can imagine that I can put in 10% of my 3 million. And some people are earning in 10 millions monthly, and they are on this scheme. So now, if you are earning so much, you can actually have some saving somewhere that can cushion the effect when you retire. But people who are at the lower range of the ladder of employment are the one really who feels the impact in the longer run. And I think this is that's the area where assessment needs really to be done. And that's one of the arguments that NC is putting on the table, that if this must work for workers, then of course their minimum wage must be very encouraging. And that was why they were proposing about 200,000 minimum wage for the least paid worker, so that this fund can really accumulate that when these people are living paid employment, they will be able to sustain a lifestyle, if not equal to what they currently maintain as they're working, but at least it will be near what they currently enjoy.
Okay, let's look at claims of benefits. At the time that a worker retires or needs to access a certain percentage of the contribution, are there bottlenecks, or do they seem to be bottleneck in having access to these contributions?
There should be no bottlenecks. Like the law says, is when you're 50 years or you're retired, you can have access to a bigger chunk of that cake. And then, of course, the rest is put on life insurance that will be able to give you guaranteed money monthly or quarterly, as the case may be, by the Act. And, of course, if you had contributed up to 10 years, you can actually also withdraw up to 25% of the chunk that you have put in there. So the law has made provisions on how this is accessible. Don't forget, too, that, of course, there are 3 basic institutions that are in charge of this management of the pension scheme. You have the PENCOM, which is a commission that regulates the practice and license those who are the pension fund administrators and the pension fund custodians. Now, the administrator creates accounts, but the collections is warehoused with the custodians. So, to that extent, you have a lot of transparency. 2 bodies are managing these issues. So, there shouldn't be bottleneck really, except that, of course, in terms of the creation of your PIN or transfer issues that may happen from one employment or the other, there are issues there which, of course, may be personal to individual. I don't think I've heard of any of such cases where people had to access their fund and there were some bottlenecks. I don't have any notice of such.
For those who those things see the need to be part of this scheme, I would like you to educate them on the benefits and why it's still important to have a pension scheme.
Well, I don't think it's here again now, because it's law. It's law. And what the law says especially is that if you're working and you're in an organization and you have up to 15%, 15 people in that employer, you have to mandatorily be part of that scheme. Otherwise, you will be breaking the law of the land. Now, but I think the people which we should also think or speak for are mostly people who are in a formal sector or those who are working in an environment where they are not up to. Even the law also makes provisions that they can actually contribute, but that's voluntary. And I think it's just important that for people to understand that it's not just enough for people to collect money and spend everything. That level of financial education is important for us as a people, because we cannot be talking about living well if we are not saving. Saving is a culture. I usually say to people, there's nothing that, for example, the Holy Books has not spoken to. We read a situation when the Bible speaks about the 7 fat year in Egypt and the 7 lean year. And I think that is a model that people will need to really have to imbibe or key into. That there's always the year of plenty and there's also the year that there's no plenty. And so what do? You have to find a way of accounting. In short, I teach people to say to them, look, what scripture actually make provisions for is that for every income that you receive, you have to put 20% aside, which is 1/5. Learning from the model of Joseph. That said, look, we are farming, whatever you gather this year, 20% should be set aside for investment. And I say, not just pension fund alone. We are looking at people who, if you set aside 20%, if you can contribute 8%, for example, to your pension fund, you can also put another 12% elsewhere so that you can mop up some resource, multiple source of income for yourself, so that at old age, you are not necessarily going to be over-dependent on your children, who we are also not even, in terms of the way we are using resources today, we are really not even making the world safe for them. Where people are, that's the reason why a lot of people are talking about sustainability. Now we are having, even in our time, where you have parents who are paying their grandchildren's school fees. And you know what that tells you? Because their parents are not as successful as their grandparents. Because as resources is depleting, you can't really make account. So you can actually not bank on your children that, if I train my children, for example, they become a security for me. No. So you have to have a double measure of security while you are thinking about spending whatever income that comes your way as you work.
In the event of death of a retiree or a worker who has contributed, what happens?
Well, the Act makes provisions for that. That, of course, you have somebody who is your next of kin that has been really programmed that whatever you have contributed, of course, automatically, once those process of death certification is authenticated, directly the money is paid to your benefactor.
Let's look at the issue of retirement now, and then inspite the education, inspite the public awareness. There are some people who are still not planning for retirement. Why do you think it's so?
I think it's just a culture. It's a thrifty culture in our environment. And I think this, for me, speaks to the real issues that challenge us as a people. Why we're all speaking about bad economy, bad economy, bad economy. What really makes bad economy is the volume and the level of consumption amongst us. And sometimes, like my friend will say, he calls it the mad theory, where we gather even things that we don't want. And this is the real problem that we have to face as a nation. You see, we invest in things that are not necessary. And you can imagine, for example, a young boy who just starts employment, and they are paying you money. And all you think is important for you is to save money to buy an iPhone. Which, of course, is not going to add any simple value. Now, you discover that in the first 5 months of your employment, because your target is iPhone 14 or 15, all you do is that you are saving to get a good phone just to impress somebody. And therefore, you don't really inculcate or imbibe the culture of savings. This is where the real issues are for us. I said to people, there's a portion in Solomon's wisdom in Ecclesiastes chapter 11 where he says that, you sow seed and you scatter your seed abroad or ship your grains abroad. After many years, returns come to you. And he went further to say, invest in 7 or 8 businesses because you don't know which one that is going to be profitable. I said to one of my friends recently, and I said to him, please, I don't think you should be banking on this contributory pension to live a good life. Because if you consider the salary you earn today, and consider what you are contributing, and looking at the investment level, especially in an environment where we're having global crisis, financial crisis, sometimes you see market drop. And as market drops, the value of your contribution also drop. So for you to be able to live a good life, you must have a plan B in terms of investment. And so this for me is also very critical. And I mentioned here some time ago, a government can also help their worker. Because in the UAE, this was done and it proved really successful. That the T-Cellat, which of course we have is proprietary here in Nigeria today, was a kind of an investment that the UAE government did for their teachers. Which, aside from pension, that they can actually collect dividend in a year as long as a T-Cellat company is alive. So that company was floated by the government to assist the teachers in the UAE because their income was very low. And so a lot of the teachers are big boys because you have about 40,000 shares in that company. And so every year, when dividends are declared, and of course you see, the company has always been profitable. That's why they are expanding everywhere. And so you can actually augment what people are getting. And I think apart from this 8%, 10% contribution, we must also look for creative ways to create wealth for those who work so that their future can actually be very secured.
Okay, let's look at the benefits on the side of the employer. What benefits is this scheme giving to the employer?
Well, of course, you know, you can't talk about the benefit to the employer because it's a worker that is satisfied that can give you the highest level of productivity. Now, if somebody is working for you, for example, and of course there's no show of his tomorrow, chances are that, of course, he want to take what he will gain tomorrow today. And of course, this has been the reason really why a lot of people cheat their company and defraud company. Now, when people understand that their company is also making plans to have a future secured for them, now those people can actually volunteer their service and contribute to the productivity of such enterprise. So this is a huge benefit because it becomes an incentive for workers to really become productive, knowing fully well that the work is doing is also taking into account that in years to come, he may not be as strong to be able to contribute, but they are putting something to make life better for him in the future. So this is incentive and this is a motivation.
But okay, knowing this, why do some employers still find it a challenge to key into the process?
Well, I don't think it's a challenge really, but I think it's just sometimes ignorance. Like I said in the earlier section, looking at some of the things that we talk about, insurance and things like that, some people are just naturally skeptical about issues and they don't believe that these things are. And some people also believe that, look, I'll give you what you feel you can earn, then you go and do your saving yourself. I really don't care. But I think these are issues which actually need education, which is, of course, like what we're doing here today. That, of course, apart from the salary that you give to people, which, of course, they spend, you know, you pay somebody a very big salary, he's living in a very big apartment, wearing very big suit like Femi is putting on this expensive tie this morning. And at the end of the day, at the end of the month, really has saved nothing. He has saved nothing. So then the future looks bleak. So it is a way of the employer actually helping the employee to think about tomorrow. And I think this is why it's important, and companies should key into the law of the Contributory Pension Act.
All right. Thanks for that compliment anyway. Now, talking about tomorrow, you know, how do we begin to, you know, encourage workers or those who are in the workforce now to put in place what we call financial plans or financial goals that will work for them when they retire?
You see, I said this before, we need a whole lot of financial education in our system. I say to people, if you are earning small, you cannot save. Even when you start to earn big, you will not be able to save. So saving is a culture. In their book, Culture Matters, in the preface to that book, Samuel Huntington compared the culture of Africa with that of South Korea, using Ghana as a model, and see where South Korea was in the 1970s and where Ghana was in 1970. Same parameter, everything. Underdeveloped country, saving. What happened between 1970 2023? South Korea is becoming a third world because they are thrifty, and the Ghanaian will still remain third world because, of course, they lack financial education. And this is where the real issues are, that when you look at societies where civilization is happening, what do you see? You see a culture of people who think well. Take, for example, just issue of marriage. Two people walk into the registry and they walk out with two witnesses on both sides. And then they walk into an eatery, have reception, and then they can go on honeymoon. But in Africa, you have to borrow to do wedding. You will start from traditional wedding. You borrow money. Then you will go to registry. You borrow money. Then you will go to the church. You borrow money. And whereas all these forms are all one and same. And they are all both recognized by the law of the federation. So it's either you wed in the registry or you wed in a church, which is an extension actually of the registry. Or then you do traditional engagement or marriage, which are all of them both valid. But here in Africa, we have to do the three. And the three are ceremonies. This is a problem. So we really don't think about how we spend our money. Now, like they say, the hook doesn't make the monk. Even in terms of packaging, like they call it here in a part of the world, that we package so well that we have to borrow money to buy clothes. In this culture in the Southwest here, the Ashwebi culture, I will see now today that Ashwebi culture has gone into secondary school, that when people are graduating from secondary school, they go and take Ashwebi. Now you're asking for what purpose? We are borrowing gown and hiring gown from kindergarten 1 to primary 1, primary 1 to primary 6. On every occasion, people are wearing gown, and all these things are taking money away from parents, so you can't save. This is the issue. We must understand and ask ourselves, what exactly do we really want? Is it a future that is bright? That when we are old, we can be as good as if we were working. And this is what a lot of us need to think about. But see, people have made children their retirement plan. And incidentally, this has been failing for a couple of reasons. So you can't really do this. You must invest in your future. And this is important. That when you are giving money, you know how to put this money to use. And know how to grow this money. You can cut down on the number of Coke you drink, for example, per day. And if you cut down on the number of Coke, take a bottle of Coke today is 200 naira. The share of First Bank is still less than 17 naira. So which means incidentally, you can actually use a bottle of Coke to buy 3 shares units. And this is critical. So when we don't deal with the consumption of things we eat, and we're only thinking about tomorrow, we're only thinking about today, we are not investing in tomorrow, we come to that situation in which Mesa Otabi wrote in his book, where he called that Esau is the kind of a symbol for people who are not thrifty. Because when the time comes where you need to take your blessing, definitely you will miss it. But like they say, the future is very cheap. The present is expensive. Most people in Africa want to invest in the present and ignore the very cheap future.
Okay, talking about taking blessings, I just need to inform you that the sales department is waiting to take money for the advert you just gave to some brand. But apart from that, or away from that, the concept of retirement, or when we talk about retirement, seems to be a thing for those in the corporate environment alone, or for those who are getting close to a certain age. But I know that there is benefits in early planning for retirement. But how can we make it a thing that is open to those not just in the corporate sector? Because even if you do business, even if you are an entrepreneur, a time will come where you are not that fit to the going here and there, looking for money or running your business. So how should it be that everyone sees it as a thing they should plan for?
Well, I think that a whole lot actually changed. I used to have an uncle who is late now, and anytime anybody was misbehaving then, he said, well, I really don't care what you do because my grandmother has already made provision for the thing I'm going to eat till I die. And these were all invested in cash crops. Every season he's reaping. So he doesn't look to anybody to borrow money. And that was a kind of investment. And that was a kind of financial literacy. And I think this is what all of us, not just those who work, even those who are in the informal sector, so that we can be able to look at our life and put it in perspective. I had this conversation some time ago in my son's school. We had a PTA meeting, and somebody raised an issue and said, look, we are investing in our children. And I say, paying your children's school is just investment. Just a responsibility you have to fulfill. You need to invest in your future. And this is critical. Because while we are counting our costs, we must understand that whatever resources is coming to us as a people, that we're also putting some aside for our children. I've seen a lot of people who are going to borrow money to send their children to private school because they don't want a strike. And then the children come out of school, there's no employment. And then you suffer stroke and you are dead. That's a foolish way to live. So it's important that everybody understand this principle, that there's a time when we are strong. You know, the way the scripture puts it, he said, you know, walk while it is day, because the night come when we cannot walk. And that is when it's our old age. You are less productive. You are having more health challenges. You will be needing more financial assistance. And then, of course, if your children they are not as successful, then you find yourself in misery. This is for me why it's important that everybody must creatively think how we do consumption so that we can invest in our future, and of course we'll have a good life to live at old age.
All right. That was our sermons. We want to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, and I'm hoping with this submission of yours there will be change of mindset. You know, like you said, there's a need to plan for retirement, and I think you've also, you know, inspired me as well to take some actions after this program.
Change start with us.
Yes, I know some of the actions that Femi wants to take, because yesterday during the show when the real estate experts were talking, Femi was taking notes of the key locations to make investments.
I'm happy you've got my back.
Well, that's just to tell you that you don't necessarily have to wait to be under the employ of a corporate organization where you can key into the contribution pension scheme. You can do that independently, and there are other investment options that you should consider. Make hay while the sun shines. I am Blessing H. That's been the show today. Business Insight comes up at 10 a.m. Thank you for staying.
And my advocacy is plan for your retirement. I am Femi Ayodele. Bye for now.